I'm lucky enough to be here today with Raphael McGowan, who is a man of many, I guess I should say a jack of many trades actually, and also one of our USC alumni who graduated with their Bachelor of Business in 2010. And as is the sort of narrative with this project, Raph has an interesting professional narrative that I would like to share with students to hopefully inspire and give them some insight as they transition through uni into the real world. So, Raph, thank you very much for being here today and having a chat with me.
Not a problem, thanks Dave.
No worries. And I guess where I want to start is uni. So the one thing we all have in common here is a USC alumni in this project. And I want to know, was uni always on the cards for you? Was it something that you knew you were going to naturally transition to after high school? And in particular, beyond that, what business, your major? So sort of two questions there. Was it always on the cards, and why business?
I was enrolled in university when I first finished high school. Yep. I deferred for a year, and a week before I was set to go to university down in New South Wales, Mum said, "Are you going?" And I said, "I don't think I will." And I'd spoken to friends overseas, and I felt like it was a good time to start traveling, to grow up a little bit. So I took off, which was planned originally for 12 months, and it turned into 4 years overseas.
And why? What did your friends tell you that automatically kind of made you change your mind at that point?
A friend who was a couple of years older than me, he went and travelled, lived in England for 6 months. And from that, when he came back and shared the stories, I thought to myself, well, why can't I do that? Why can't I go overseas? So I was the first of my siblings to head overseas, did that for 4 years, and then I came to that point where I knew I wanted to return to Australia and attend university.
And in that stint, before you actually decided to go to university, so we're thinking about it as a typical school leaver, maybe going off to uni, one school to the next school, the bigger school, the university, and then decided, nah, I'm gonna go check the big, beautiful world out for a little while. What did you learn over those 4 years about yourself?
I really matured in those 4 years. I found that I had a lot of strengths, and that was working with people, being able to communicate. And
how did you find you had those strengths out? Is there any specific instances or examples or jobs you had along the way or experiences or?
Definitely, it was the situations that I was put on that allowed me to mature and realize I was good with people. There was a point where I left the US after a couple of years, and I went over to England to find work in the middle of winter. There was no work. I went out for a month. It was snowing, it was cold. Everyone just said, sorry, there's no work available. So I knew that the option wasn't to return home. So I redid my cover letter, and I changed it from the formal cover letter that you would normally write and said, I'm going to put more of myself into this. These are my strengths. This is why I'm traveling. This is what I've learned so far in these couple of years, and this is the value that I can add to your business. I sent that off, and half an hour later, the first hotel in Scotland wrote back to me and he said, mate, I love it. I love your cover letter. Can you come up here and start working? So
wow, I
got a job.
Wow, that's cool. And I'm not even to that part yet, that bit of advice you might give students, but that's brilliant. I love the fact that you just talked about being yourself, and through that sort of travel on your own in the beginning, the couple of years in the US, you learned a little bit about yourself, and you had the self-awareness to say, hey, wait a minute, why don't I put more of myself into these cover letters and see how that goes instead of doing the whole formal thing that everybody else already does. And so obviously that paid off dividends. So you started working for a little while. It was Scotland, you said?
Scotland, yeah.
So worked in Scotland for a little while, and how was living in the UK, and what did you learn over there?
I first started off in 2 years in the US,
yep.
So I loved my time there,
yep.
And I knew then I wasn't ready to go home. That's why I went over to England for a little bit. I went to Scotland from an uncle who said, go and explore it, it's a beautiful country. I found the people to be really welcoming, and at that point in my life, I was still driven towards hospitality. I wanted to work in hotels, resorts, and be a senior level manager. So I got a lot of experience being in that role. Then I came to the point where, in order to take that next step, I needed to gather more skills, more professional skills, and put a bit of polish to those that I already had.
Good. So again, a bit of self-reflection on your own terms, and thinking about what's next, and how could I grow personally, and by exploring something like university, I'm guessing, perhaps. And so that brought you back here to Australia, your home country, after 4 years abroad in the US and the UK, sort of learning a little bit about yourself, reflecting about that. And Uni of the Sunshine Coast, was that on the cards? What was your decision making there?
I'm originally from New South Wales, down in the south, and I hadn't been as far as Brisbane. And after living in Scotland and the freezing temperatures, I think there was 2 days of sunshine in about 1 year when I was there, I applied for different universities and I looked at the Sunshine Coast, I read the description, I saw photos, and it just felt like it was a good place to go to. And it was on my cards in that I wanted to pick a place that I hadn't been before, and because I'd grown as a person, I didn't want to know anyone else there and just present myself after who I really was. So I packed up my car and just drove up.
Clean slate, drove up, full car, clean slate, ready to go. And coming into the Sunshine Coast and studying at USC, did you know you were going to study business?
Yeah, I purposely enrolled in a business degree. I didn't want to enroll in a major, and my reason for that is I wanted to get a taste of marketing, human resource management, and also management itself, and walk away with knowledge across all those different areas, not just concentrate on one, because I was still unsure on what path I would take after university.
Yeah, so that was my next question to me. Why did you do that? And part of it might being unsure, but was it also maybe related to any of the experiences that you had that say, hey, maybe it's good to have a sort of diverse skill set or have a little taste of everything as opposed to maybe just specializing in one?
Yeah, definitely. I wasn't that familiar with the theory behind marketing or finance, but I knew they're all areas that are essential for one of those top level managers, and also when I was to start my own business, I would need skills, broad skills. Yeah. That was again my reason for picking a general business degree to begin with, and I always had the option after 1 or 2 years if I wanted to change or had a particular area of interest, I could then major in it.
Yep. Interesting. And with going through these sort of pockets of skills and picking up different areas of business, you mentioned in that you wanted to always start your own business. And we're going to come back to that a little bit later because you are in fact an entrepreneur, and we're going to touch on that, I think. But I want to stick with uni for a second. It's hard to actually think about when you're at university the benefit you're gaining and what skills and knowledge you're kind of taking away and building up in your repertoire. But thinking back, what do you think you learned through your university degree?
This is something I've told a lot of people, and I've been asked this question before. I tell them that whatever you're learning at university right now, you will use for the rest of your life. And the skills that I got from there is that when you are given a new assignment and you start a new subject, you know very little about it, and you apply research, asking questions to people, putting down a particular answer, then refining it, and then submitting it. And then you walk away after that semester with a greater knowledge in that particular area, and that's a foundation that you've now got, which I found I apply to everything I'm doing now in my own business and since. If it's applying for a new job, I know very little about it. I research the company. I then do up my proposal, my CV, refine it, ask questions from those who may be already working for the company on forums, and then submit. So the basic skills I use.
That's a really nice anecdote, I think, to give to students in terms of that critical thinking foundation, that problem-solving foundation. You know, all of your assessments are basically a problem. And so you're basically honing those problem-solving skills through that process that you just described. And again, you might not realize it, but as you move into the real world, it's actually a practice in that all the time, over and over and over, and expanding your repertoire of skills and knowledge as you do it. Within that process, so some of the things you talked about were asking questions, talking with people. I really like the refinement part. What sorts of skills are involved with those particular areas? Like what's the importance of asking questions? What's the importance of talking to people along the way?
The importance is not only at university but also in my business career, asking questions so you can get the correct response and also a new outlook on that particular question. Instead of working in isolation and just reading, we've got access at USC, and what I love about the university is that the size of it, in that you've got lecturers and you've got the tutors who are accessible at short notice. You're not a number, you're an actual identity on campus. So I wanted to make use of that by setting up meetings and asking in more detail, what do you mean in that particular lecture by this term, or can we explore what that criteria is? They make themselves available, and again, that comes down to communication, putting yourself out there. At first, in my first year, I was probably a little standoffish, but then as my confidence grew and I started to do well in my assignments, and I realized that the effort that I put in equaled the results that I was getting back.
Yeah.
So that's something which I maintained throughout my rest of the degree, in talking to not only other students, but to the lecturers themselves.
Yeah, right. And I think that's really important. And what you're talking about there is a bit of initiative, really. You took the initiative. It's a service that's offered there for you. So you actually showed a bit of proactiveness and a bit of initiative to go and make the most out of it. And I would guess you would agree that would be a piece of advice that you might pass on to students is do take advantage of those opportunities that you get through your experience at USC. So.
And that comes about an advantage of the university schedule in that you treat it as a full-time job. You've got plenty of hours to get all the work done and still have fun and work on the weekends if you need to. But make use of your time and treat it as a full-time job. So if you've got spare time, go and explore that subject a little bit further.
While maintaining a bit of social balance as well too, a little bit of fun here and there.
And that was important, and that was something which I made sure I did. So I always did 4 subjects a semester. I worked at a casual job Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, so my expenses were always taken care of. But I made sure that there was balance. As you said, you're at university for the experience with international students and to socialise. It's an important time.
And what did you learn from, and I think that's a great point on, you were balancing uni work, you were balancing a social life, and you were balancing a casual job as well too. What did you learn through balancing all of those things?
That came from my parents. Well, I've got 7 brothers and sisters, and my parents always said, if you can, make sure that you always cover your expenses. And once that equation of money is taken out of the picture, then you can relax. So that was the first thing I did, was get a job as soon as I moved up here that was close to university, and then I know that my expenses were covered. Yeah. And these are the days that I work, and then I still had 5.5 days that I could spend at university doing my work.
So you were very strategic about your time management from the get-go, basically.
That's a strength of mine, is my time management and making sure that, and that's been refined over the years. Sometimes it was too structured, where there wasn't enough time to socialise, or having a great time out with friends. Sorry, I've got to go home now. I only allowed 3 hours for this. So I've lightened up
a little bit.
Yeah, I've definitely relaxed. Yeah.
But I'm sure that served you well in other capacities in terms of what you're doing now. And for those students that don't have that sort of natural time management skill set that was maybe instilled through your upbringing, what would you suggest to them to improve that? Because I think that is a useful sort of soft skill, not only for university and something that you develop in university, but also obviously for the real world as well too. What would you suggest to help with that and help build that time management capacity?
I have other friends who've reached out to me because of my time management skills. So I'd say if that's not an area that comes naturally to you, seek out a friend who does manage their time well and ask them what they do. And there's plenty of resources online that even I use in terms of mapping out your day and finding what works for you. Is it a checklist each day, giving yourself a few tasks regarding uni work? Make sure you read 3-4 weeks in advance when assignments are due. Have a big plan. I'm a visual person, so I like a big map up in my room. These are the weeks. Set out what needs to be done so you can visualize it.
Right. No, I like how you frame that, and that there isn't necessarily a perfect way to do it, but it's about finding the system that works for you and talking to people about it. Informal and formal networks, are they very important to you? And
that's another great strength of university, is that it taught me the best approach for me to learn a new task. Some people would read, so I would sit somewhere for 3 hours and read a textbook and highlight it. I'd close it up at the end of it. I realised I didn't remember any of it. So I realised I need to write. So I'd just go through pages and pages where I'd write headings and write notes over and over again. Then I would learn it. And then when it would come time to exam or needing to speak to someone, I'd be able to recall it. So that's another advantage. Find out what system works for you.
So I mean, it's okay to sort of trial things and make mistakes and maybe screw up a little bit. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's part of it. So let's jump a little bit. So you've gone through your uni degree. You've done pretty well. You've picked up a few, foundational skills and knowledge, especially the process that we talked about. Probably the principal, it seems like, skill set and knowledge base that you picked up from university. First job out of university, or that transition out of university where you're going, what am I going to do now? How was that and what happened there?
So I was working, I had the same part-time job throughout university. It was a big venue here on the coast. It was in hospitality. It allowed me to refine and put into practice what I was learning, theoretic at uni, and then put into practice.
So just as an aside, would you suggest students try to find some part-time work while they're doing it?
It gave me a great balance because your head is in the books and you're in this environment, university, where you're learning and there's pressures to complete the work on time. And then having a casual job means you're out there, you're socializing with other people, and it's time to switch off. But whatever we do, we're getting new experiences and new skills from it. And that's what having a part-time job allowed me. So I'm learning new skills at university, but then I'm continually learning new skills working in a casual job.
And
it's
often,
a great balance.
and often marrying the both. Right? So you continued out of university, you had this casual job. Did you sort of transition to that full-time for a little while, or did you start applying for your dream jobs, or what were you doing?
So I spent 9 months working, so I went straight into a full-time position. Again, I spoke with my boss 3 months before I finished university, and I said, this is what I finished studying. I'm now wanting to transition into a management position. It'd be great for me to give me time to think about what that first big professional job might be. He said, I'd love to have you stay on. So I worked there for 9 months. It was great to be able to go straight into a full-time job. It gave me structure to be able to live on the coast and have a bit of downtime in a way. I just finished university. I put a lot of time into my studies. So it was almost a holiday, but a paid holiday because I enjoyed what I was doing. I did that for 9 months, and then a big part of what I've always done is take time off to grow personally. It's always been something that's important to me. That's why I left when I was 20 to go and travel for 4 years. And then after doing university, I felt like I wanted to do another experience, but for myself. So I linked up with 2 friends, international, that I'd met here at university, and we cycled across the US. So we all wanted to do something that was challenging, and I picked it and I knew it would help me with teamwork and also just patience. I'd say patience. Knowing that I'd be in a small group and learning a new skill set, which was cycling. I hadn't done much before. So we got our gear together, we trained for 4 months, and then we all flew and met in Seattle in the US, and we set off from there. And I did that for just under 3 months, and it was a great experience. Again, to be able to work with them, you're cooking food on the side of the road, you're switching off, but during that time I was teaching them how to cook, so life skills, and then they were teaching me some of the skills that they'd learned. So you just never stop learning. You just never stop learning.
I think that's good, and I'm going to come back to that because I want to know a little bit more about that experience. But even beforehand, when you're at this transition from uni into the real world, you go and you talk to your boss 3 months ahead of time. 3 months ahead of time. So again, the importance of being proactive and taking the initiative to set things up, and not maybe waiting to the last minute, or not sort of maybe thinking about, oh, she'll be right, mate, or whatever. It's about actually saying, kind of thinking ahead a little bit and just being a little bit strategic. Do you think that was pretty important in terms of that transition?
It's helpful to always plan a little bit ahead. Even I wasn't sure on what my first professional job might be, but I knew that I was happy to stay on the Sunshine Coast. So I was proactive, spoke to my boss and said, 3 months, I'd like to move into that position. So it's something which you've got to give a little foresight into what's going to happen in the future.
And do you think the fact that you actually did that showed initiative to your boss? The fact that you were saying sort of 3 months ahead of time, this is where I want to be and this is what I'd like to do, I'd like this opportunity. Is that something, obviously it was met with positivity by your boss?
Yeah, he was happy that, 1, I wanted to stay, but 2, that I took it upon myself to go to him and say, I'm willing to take that next step up. And I was armed with a lot of great skills and knowledge from university, and I wanted to put it into practice. I knew I wasn't at the point where I wanted to relocate. So for me, that was a good decision for now.
And a good opportunity to continue growing. And then beyond that, and again, I like the fact that you're self-reflecting a lot during this, and probably a lot of that foundation was built on your initial experience overseas, and you realized the value of something like that. And so now you're coming to this point, you've spent a good 9 months after uni working, making a little bit of money, getting more additional full-time professional experience, again, expanding the knowledge base, the skill base. And then you go on this mega trip in the US, this bicycle trip across the US, for your own personal growth and self-development. And what did you get out of that? What did you get out of 3 months in the US with some good mates that you met and riding your bike across the country?
I learned that there's a lot of good people in the world, and that was something which when we set off, it was about how fit can we get, working as a team. But it turned out when we reflected during it and after it, it was about the people. It was about the people we encountered. They added to our whole experience, and what could we add to them? And just the generosity that people showed by the three of us being ourselves and putting ourselves out there, calling up. We called up firehouses, churches of any denomination, 3, 4, 5 days in advance and said, hey, we're a group of 3 boys. We're traveling through, or 3 young men. Yeah. We're traveling through. Do you mind if we set up our tents? And all of them said yes, yes, yes. And how that came about was the first 2 days, we weren't really planned on accommodation. And we would cycle all day for 70, 80 kilometres. We'd pull into a town at 5 p.m. and we were hungry. We'd been cycling all day and we had nowhere to sleep. And we're riding around a town that we've never been to before, looking for a place to pitch a tent and cook our food. So after 2 days, there was tension in our group, and we're like, hey, this is not going to work. So we sat down and we said, how are we going to go about it? And we just shared ideas. And we said, let's call in advance these places, because we read online that firehouses, churches, they're a possibility. And that was our plan. And then the people we met each night, we found that sometimes they wouldn't even be at the church or at the firehouse. They would leave the keys under the mat.
Just trust you.
They would just trust us. And we found that what we could give back to them was our stories. The stories about what we'd done in our lives and what we'd learnt so far on that trip. So the people was probably the biggest highlight out of it.
Amazing, amazing. I have a good mental picture of my head of you guys sort of bickering with yourselves in those first few days. And I want to pull a little bit out of that, actually. Conflict management. Dealing with conflict. Those sorts of situations where you're thinking on your feet and you're dealing with conflict. Has that influenced how you operate today in your capacity as an entrepreneur?
I recognise that when we're tired, when we're exhausted, that we're not at our best, and that's when we need to be the most patient, especially towards others, that our friends or even our colleagues. So that taught me a lot, to recognise those early signs that if I've worked too much or I am exhausted, maybe that's the time to call it a day, and it's not the right time to sit down and try to work through something. So we learnt that on the trip, that, hey, if we're tired, let's eat, let's rest, and then we'll talk about our plan going forward.
Good. Yeah, again, amazing experience. I have, I just had some nice pictures in mind of what you guys would have encountered and gone through during that. And why did you go on this experience? Was it purely for self-development? Were there other things driving you along the way?
At that time, I had a couple of family members and other friends who'd been diagnosed with depression, and I wanted a greater purpose and to bring awareness to it. There's always been a part of me which finds great pleasure in helping other people, and I hadn't quite found that sole purpose or that business to work on that idea. And here was an opportunity to raise some awareness in Australia about depression. So I got in contact with a couple of organisations, and we all decided to pick our own cause. And so others picked eating disorders, and another one was diabetes. And the 3 of us shared our learnings throughout that, and it gave us greater purpose when we were over there, that it wasn't just about ourselves, but there were other people that were going through struggles and hard times, and we would think of them when we were hurting, cycling up a 3-hour switchback, for example. Those people and those people that we loved, and the greater cause behind what we were doing would come into effect.
And you spent 3 months doing this, and you had this cause associated with you. You're growing as a person. You've given yourself this deeper meaning and this purpose. It's a very much sort of self-actualization type trip. When you finish it, how have you changed? So I'll rephrase that. When you finished it, how did you change, and how did that change continue to affect you into when you came back to Australia?
I didn't quite finish the trip. So 2 weeks before I was planned to schedule and hit the coast, I got a call from my dad, and he told me that my sister was unwell, and that carried on for 3 or 4 days. I had limited communication with family back home, and I said to the guys, you know what, I can't finish. I didn't share with them what happened or the call from Dad. I continued on, and then they said, hey, what's going on? We've noticed a change. And I said, this is what's happened in our family. I'd rather be close to them right now than continuing to cycle. I certainly felt like I got more than what I expected out of the trip. So I said goodbye to them and then came back to Australia. So to answer that question, it was even before finishing it that I felt.
That you realized you had gained more than you ever thought you were going to gain. Yeah, and that's, again, I think a really nice self-observation that you picked up from it. And again, very sort of intuitive of you to realize that. What happened then? What happened when you found out your sister was ill?
So I came back to Australia and I moved straight down to Sydney. So when I was overseas, a lot of the times I was asking the question to myself when I was cycling, what's the next step for me? What am I supposed to do? I was looking at the army potentially, and I wasn't quite sure. And then when I came back, that decision was almost made for me. And I was presented with another option, which was sticking within my experience around hospitality and wanting to manage resorts. I was given a position to work as a manager on a resort overseas. But at the same time, my sister was unwell, so that was my priority. So I said no to that job and then went down to Sydney. Now, I didn't immediately apply for a job. Again, I said I need to cover my expenses. So I went and got a part-time job at a cinemas, working in La Premiere and at a gym. And that, again, covered my expenses, took money out of the equation, and the rest of the time I just spent with my sister and her family. Then after 3 or 4 months, the time came where I wanted to get back in to working full-time, and that was when I was looking for that first real professional job. That was a 3 or 4 month process. It was not working for those big companies, and I wanted to go as corporate as possible. Wow. I always had the dream from watching movies, primarily watching movies, white shirt, tie, shaved every day, short hair. Yeah, I wanted to experience that, catching the bus, public transport, because I'd never lived in a big major city before. So I applied for big corporate companies that had graduate programs, and what I realized is that if you wanted those graduate programs, you need to start in your second year at university. So I felt like I was a little behind the 8 ball working for some, and I wanted to go into consulting. So those big consulting firms, they required people to do internships with them to get that experience. So I thought, great, well, that wasn't my path, but I know I've got the university degree, the skills I learned from that, and the experience in the US. So I've got a strong case. So I presented that in interviews, and it took 3, 4, 5 interviews over 3 months at different jobs, and some you'd go 2 or 3 stages into it, and then you weren't successful. So I persevered, and then what got me in the end was a company called SAP, and it was something I did in the interview that he said got me the job. And he said what it was is that I always took a notepad and pen with me everywhere. Someone told me at an early age, take a notepad and pen, you never know what you need to write down and it's not forgotten. And back then there wasn't a smartphone. So I took a notepad and pen and I asked him what would the role entail, and I wrote it down because he was explaining something which was certainly new to me. At the end of it he goes, okay, great, now tell me about your role. I looked at it and I just read off what I said, and he said, that's got you the job. He said, because everything we need to do is to record it. It's about flowcharts, it's about going to meetings and capturing. He said, he showed that. So, yeah, it blew me away, but that's what got me the job.
So Raph, when you're going for these corporate type jobs, you mentioned that typically you have to have, you start these very early in your uni degree, and that's the typical sort of pipeline and pathway that most people that land these graduate jobs get. You didn't have that, but you had a hell of a lot of experience overseas. Were you able, and through your other travels and at adventures really and experiences, were you able to draw on that for these corporate interviews, and were those experiences respected? Did they help you gain traction in these interviews?
It seemed to resonate really well that I had life experiences in there where I could show teamwork, communication, resilience, problem solving. These were skills they were wanting to look and see that I'd had experience in, and that drawing upon the cycling, working at hospitality, struggles when traveling, having no money, going about finding a job. I used all those examples during the interview process. So it certainly helped me progress. So applying early on to go through a graduate program, that is one option. It wasn't my option, so I used the strengths that I had and certainly made sure that they were highlighted.
You've gotten your corporate gig, Raph, and you're pretty stoked with that. You're sort of moving along in that capacity. You're getting that taste, that experience from the movies that you always wanted. Yeah. Briefly, I just want to come back to that interview process though. When you said you got 3 or 4 knockbacks from these corporate gigs. How did you deal with that? It
was a knockback. I would say it was a little upsetting, but I didn't hold on to it.
Well, how did you not hold on to it? What did you do to keep yourself from holding on to it?
Because I asked them why. I asked them why they knocked me back, or why I wasn't the appropriate candidate for that particular role. And by asking that, they told me. And one of the examples was that my proposal wasn't as good as the others that were submitted. So I asked them, can they send me an example? And they sent me an example, and I realized instead of sending in 2 or 3 A4 pages, I need to go to, and that was to be left with them. I go to the trouble and spend $20 and have it bound like a university assignment, where I put a cover page, cover letter, images, and made it look professional, because that's what they use in the real world. And that's what I started carrying in, and that blew people away. And that was left with my employer that did give me the job, but other ones before it, they commented on it, and it looked schmick, and I made sure that the amount of money it cost to get it, it was worth it.
Wow, that's really, really insightful sort of stuff there, I think, and something that a lot of students could take away from that. So you didn't let these, you know, quote unquote failures get in your way, these knockbacks get in your way. You took it as a chance to learn, take it on the chin. How can I do better next time? And that's how you kind of got to where you wanted to be. It's not a straightforward process, is it?
And my outlook is that I need to leave some of those things just to happen. Like I've always been of the mindset the right job will come along. And as much as I was wanting that first job because it sounded great, it wasn't for me. Someone else got it, so be it. So I just kept at it, interviewing, and I was looking at a very sales role. And then during that first couple of companies, I realized they were mentioning consulting. I really like the sound of consulting because I'm someone who likes to be across multiple tasks and not be assigned to the one client, have different clients, different experience, and that appealed to me. So that's when, thankfully, getting knocked back for those first couple, I then took another direction and started concentrating on consultancy roles.
Made you realize the direction you're actually more interested in. So you go through this corporate gig, and you're maybe getting to the end of that stint. How long did you work in the corporate world?
So 6.5 years.
6.5 years.
6.5 years I worked in there, and it was always my plan to get as much experience and skills from that corporate environment, and then to be able to funnel that into my own business. Right. And that was something which over those 6 years would pop up from time to time, whether it was catching the bus in the city or having a long day at work going, what if I was putting all these hours into my own? But I'd never come to that exact business idea. So I just kept at it, and I enjoyed my role.
So sorry to interrupt you. In the back of your head, you kind of always knew that you wanted to have your own business of some sort, or is this something that grew as you were in that corporate role, or?
It was a seed that was planted early on in my life, working for other people who'd started their own business, and the flexibility that comes with it, but to be able to wake up and do something that you love every day was something that really did appeal to me. I just hadn't found it. It took me years to find it. So I knew that whatever job I was doing, there was always skills and valuable lessons that I could be gaining from whatever job that I was doing. So,
and if you were to summarize them, maybe just 2 or 3 sort of main skills, knowledge-based experiences that you took away from your time in the corporate world, what would those be?
Networking.
Networking, right?
Networking would definitely be one. Emails. That's a skill. Emails. Know how to use emails, the strategy behind it, not being emotive. That was something which comes to mind. The other skill would be practice. Just practice. It's similar to university. It's similar to presentations. Anything you're doing, you don't know what it is from the beginning, but just practice. So spend those extra hours. So then when you are presenting to people or you're in a meeting and you need to share your ideas, you're knowledgeable on it because you've practiced, you're not saying it for the first time.
What's the value of networking in your opinion?
Networking, everything comes back to networking. I realize that now, I realized it then, but more so now, it's networking, it's who you know. It's being aware that whoever you meet, you're not quite sure on who they know or how they might be able to assist or how you might be able to assist them in the future. So make a good impression on people, be yourself, don't talk negatively about anyone, and when the time comes, you might be able to get in contact with them to assist with something. But I find that with networking is also keeping up communication with your network. So it's not just meeting someone who is a CEO 10 years ago, then out of the blue, hey, do you reckon you could help me with my business? It's being genuine and including this person in what they're doing and finding out what they're doing and asking the question. Yeah, it's a relationship.
And just to clarify a bit too, when you talk about networking, is it about attending network events, or is it about just building genuine relationships with people that you come into contact with, regardless of the venue or the whether it's a formalized networking event or not.
So maybe it's networking / relationships, but it's about networking events. And when going to those networking events, it's not just about you. It's about the other person, asking them what they do to learn more about them, then sharing yourself. But you're networking or building relationships anywhere. You just never know.
So these serve you really well. Networking, communication, specifically in building relationships, but also basic things like email, which I think is a really good tip.
I'll tell one quick story on the email. So it was my second week working at Commonwealth Bank, and I was put on that client site, knowing very little about the product that we were using, and I was there to learn. And there was some emails going back and forth, and then suddenly an email was directed to me from a very senior executive, and he copied in 2, 3, 4 lines of other staff, and he was very blunt in saying, "You haven't delivered this, where's this information, where are these stats?" And it took me back, and I was like, what's he talking about? And like anything, I'm not emotive, I don't just shoot back a response. So I thought about it. I went to my manager who was sitting with me and said, "Can you have a read of this?" And he said, "Well, how do you think you respond?" And I said, "Well, we've got this data here, here's the response for this," and just stuck very factual. And he said, "Well, go ahead and do it." I did it, sent it back to him, told him what he needed to know, told him the date that we sent it. That was it, very clear, sent it back to him, no response. And then the head of the project, who's senior to him, wrote excellent response. And that was it. So that taught me a valuable lesson in don't get emotive on emails, and sometimes you need to write a response and let it sit there and then go back and change it. And if you're not sure, talk to your team.
It's okay to talk to people and ask questions. Yeah, no, that's a great story. That's a great story. So, cool. So you pick up all these valuable experiences to this corporate gig, and then you realize I'm going to start a business. What's happened there?
So the business idea came about after my sister. So she was unwell, and that led to her passing away, and it was from melanoma. So as well as working full-time throughout those 6.5 years, I then started volunteering with the Melanoma Institute. I wanted to learn more about this cancer that was not only causing the loss of my sister and my family and friends, but just how widespread it was. So that was something which I maintained in my spare time throughout Sydney.
So you kind of had this going on the side a bit as well.
I had this going on, and it was starting to give me more excitement and more purpose and more clarity around what this business could be. So I started looking at one way to protect yourself from melanoma is sunscreen. So I started asking people, and as someone who loves the outdoors, using sunscreen, what problems did they have with it? And the general response was, "I don't want it on my hands, I can't reach my back." Yeah. And then I started...
little anecdotal consumer research, little armchair research. Yeah.
So I started testing what was out there and come up with my own design. And the point hit in December 2016, where I said, the time has come, because I was working on the side, starting to chat to people, doing up a business plan. Something inside said, "Hey, now you're at the crossroad, full time into this, or you keep chipping away." And it was an easy decision. I said, company car, good salary, good job, that's been fulfilled. I want to try my own. I've got this. I felt like I had the skill set and the network to go off and start my own. And this aligned with who I was, and it used all my business skills, being a new company, creating the product, but it gave me that greater reason, which was why I'm doing it.
And so basically what you're saying is you reach this sort of point where you've got a sort of culmination of all these skills, knowledge, and experience on the professional side of things, and you've got purpose. And you're basically saying, now's the time to put the two together and pursue something that's more meaningful to me and use my skills to achieve that pursuit. Yeah. Yeah, cool. That's cool. And again, probably not a lot of people would again have the sort of self-awareness to realize that, or even if they do, to take the risk.
But I felt it was a calculated risk, in that I wasn't doing it after a year of working in a corporate role. I had 6.5 years of good experience, and my plan was to leave Sydney and relocate back to the Sunshine Coast.
Did you realize, or did you say to yourself, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, or are you just like, I'm starting this thing? Like, was it?
I'd heard the term before, but it's not a term that I'd ever used. and it certainly was a word that I could spell. I'd never used it before. And no, it wasn't. It was just, I'm going to start my own business.
Do you think many entrepreneurs think like that? Like, do you think they go, I'm going to be an entrepreneur? Or is it just, I've got these skills, I've got this purpose, boom? Or is it a mixed bag?
Most of the entrepreneurs that I've met now have just come to that realization that I'm going to start my own business and this is how I'm going. And we're described as entrepreneurs because there's so much now that's known about it.
It's very trendy. It's a sexy term to use.
It is.
There's a lot of traction in the business world around that. Whether you are an entrepreneur yourself or whether you should be more entrepreneurial at work in your position in an organization or whatever. So can you just, before we start talking about what your venture is, can you just describe to us what it's like being an entrepreneur?
It's exciting. It's exciting because I'm driving the business. I'm still at the stage where it's predominantly me. The first 12 months, it was quite isolating. It was late nights, any chance you've got to sit at a computer, getting these ideas out of your head, calling people, knowing very little about, firstly, how to design a product. So putting yourself out there, calling these people, and just, I felt like it was a slog for the first 12 months.
But drawing on your network. So drawing on your skills, drawing on your network, trying to hash this thing out.
Yeah. Basically. And those skills, again, it's asking questions, calling multiple people, not through email, but calling them on the phone. Reading first, okay, what's involved in getting something patented, knowing nothing about it. Researching online, doing a basic spreadsheet up, these are the terms, these are the different options, and then calling people. Calling patent attorneys and saying, I'm new at this, I haven't done it before. Putting yourself out there, being honest, what are my options? And doing this as research before saying, hey, I want your services, here's X amount of dollars, just asking the question. And I found that everyone's been happy to give you 5 minutes of your time and make you realize what it is.
So you actually going back to what we started with in the beginning about that process that you talked about, you're actually using this process for your own entrepreneurial adventure, or venture, I should say.
And just further to your point, so as well as considering a hard slog, it's always been enjoyable because I'm driving it, but the people again that I'm coming, like the cycling trip in the USA, it's the people that I've come into contact that I'm reconnecting with and also connecting with for the first time. And I find in this ecosystem of entrepreneurs, everyone's willing to share their ideas. When I first started, I was under the impression, don't share any ideas, keep them to yourself. And it's not the case at all. There's so many good ideas out there. It's the time or the ability to commit that time to it, to actually bringing it to life. So I find in this environment now, this entrepreneurial environment, you share ideas with people and you also feed off their energy.
So is it sexy? Is it sexy being an entrepreneur?
I'd consider it really sexy. I love what I do. I really do. I love it. I would struggle if someone said, hey, I'll give you $200,000 to go back and work full time next week. And I'm like, no, I felt like I've gone.
So is that sexiness or is that satisfaction?
If I was to be given.
No. What you're describing is is it as sexy as they make it out to be in movies and in business magazines and?
Yeah, I think it is sexy because you are driving it yourself. What you're coming in contact with every day, you don't know. One conversation with one person can take you in a brand new direction. You're slugging away. You meet someone. Oh, I can connect you with the CEO or distribution manager for Australia for a particular company. Bang, an avenue or a door just opens up. So that part of it is sexy.
So you're thriving off that. Is it a bit gritty though as well too? I mean, is it allowing you, coming back to what you said in the beginning, cover your expenses? Is it allowing you to cover your expenses?
The business doesn't at the moment. And again, moving back up here 12 months ago, the first thing I did was go and get a job. So I work Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, 30 hours, 2.5 days, my expenses are covered. That leaves me Monday to Friday to work on this. Right. And again, it gives me the balance. If I didn't work on the weekends and I was in a position to pay myself a wage, I just wouldn't be at the point where I am now because there's almost not an urgency, but an excitement to maximize my time Monday to Friday. And then the weekend, it's time to switch off. It's hospitality, so I enjoy it. I'm interacting with other people. Yeah.
Do you think a lot more entrepreneurs than people would realize when they're starting off, that's indeed what they do? They have a part-time gig while they're actually pursuing their...
I found it's very common, 2-3 jobs sometimes. People do what you need to do and you get the point will come where yourself, you've got a team, everything's covered. But in those early stages, you have to do what you have to do. And if it means 2 or 3 jobs, so be it. But it allows you then to work on your idea, what you really want to be doing.
You've got these common foundational principles that have sort of driven you across all these vast amounts of experiences through prior to uni when you were overseas, through your university experience, through your travel in the US with your biking across the country, through to the corporate gig for 6.5 years, and then culminating with this this entrepreneurial venture that you've started. So could you give us just a little bit of background about what the venture is about, and then kind of how the skills along this entire pathway, including your uni degree, have helped you with this?
Sure. So the business at the moment, what we want to concentrate on is prevention. So under that sun care banner, we know that one avenue to protect yourself is using sunscreen. And over the past 2 years, I've mapped out a number of different product ideas that are innovative, and I selected one of those, and that's what I'm working on now. It's called Backslap. And the reason behind that is I wanted to pick one product to learn the process from idea to market. And from that's...
And not become overwhelmed. Pick one, not a line or a plethora, but just learn the process. Again, coming back to processes, learn the process, work through the process.
Pick one and execute it, and all the learnings that I've done throughout this 12 months and will do, whether it's manufacturing, design, packaging, branding, a lot of that's already been created, and it's going to be easier, I feel, when I introduce the second, the third, the fourth product.
And you're learning all the different roles, all the different elements that go into actually designing a product. You're not just specializing in one, you're picking up that broad.
And that's the beauty about being an entrepreneur, is that you wear so many different hats. And if someone's like, what's your role? And I'm like, I'm finance, I'm manufacturing, I'm branding, and I love it. And where I don't have a strong skill set, I make sure I surround myself in others, whether it's friends, former colleagues, and draw on them to help beef up areas where I lack.
And so, from all of your experiences to this point now, what are the 2 or 3 things, and again, touching on your uni degree as well, what are the 2 or 3 things you're kind of taking away and that you're seeing that have been really useful in this venture that you're pursuing?
People would be one. Whether you're asking questions, whether you're dealing with people within your own network, sharing what you're doing, keeping people involved so you don't become isolated and think that it's you who have to do everything. Draw on other people and their other skill sets. And the other would be the planning side of it. As I mentioned, that process of planning, a new task is given to you, do your research, and again, put it into that assignment format. Everything that you're doing at university, whether it's spreadsheets, assignments, Word documents, you'll continue to use that, and I use it every day.
No, I think that's really good advice and tips for students. So last kind of question I'll throw at you. What's the most interesting thing about doing what you're doing at the moment and being an entrepreneur? I mean, I think you probably crossed a few of those areas, but I mean, what gets you up out of the bed every morning? What's a perk of the job? What's a perk of being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, there'd be a number of perks. The first would be the variety. The variety in that it suits my personality, is that there's multiple tasks, whether it's proposals or sponsorships or media opportunities, even interviews like today. They're exciting, and new doors continually open. And I find by being myself and speaking with other people, you don't know when you might meet someone. For example, a copywriter I used recently. Spoke to him, he did some work for me. He's now based in the UK, and he's like, hey Raph, do you mind? I shared what you're doing with this particular person who's an investment banker. They'd like to talk to you about being a potential investor. Another person, hey, I can introduce you to someone in Hawaii, they're interested in being a distributor. So the other exciting, or the perk, is that there's so much unknown. There's so much unknown, and it's exciting. And I find that I'm only really limited by my ideas, and as someone who thinks big, that's where I aim. I do what's needed to have the foundation, but I'm always thinking big, and that's where I want to take it.
Willing to get through it that first sort of year, toughing it out, getting through it, but enjoying the ride along the way, and then things start to culminate, and you can even enjoy it in other ways as well too, through all the people you get to meet, and by being yourself, which I think is a really good note to end on, Raph. So thanks for being yourself in this interview. Thanks for all the sort of experiences that you've talked about and discussed. I hope that the students do find these, and others, and other people in general do find your journey interesting and insightful. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Cheers, Raph.
Cheers.